Hello and welcome back to another Horus Heresy painting tutorial. In this video I'll be showing you how you can paint your legionaries in the colours of the white scars. So here we have the Space Marine. You can see I've primed it with a white spray primer, as the majority of the armour is white, so that acts as an excellent starter. And I've also kept the right bolster arm separate as well to allow me to paint the chest areas more easily. Now the first step in painting this miniature is to apply a wash, which is a mixture of 1 part Nuln Oil, 1 part Drakenhof Nightshade to 1 part Lamia Medium. And we'll be applying this wash over the entirety of the armour. Now white can be quite notoriously difficult to paint if you want to get some good shading in there, but this is why we've concocted this mixture. And as you can see, when I've applied it to the miniature, it adds some shading into the recesses, as you can see just around about the knee pad here, whilst retaining the white colour of the armour quite nicely. So I'll be applying this across the entirety of the miniature. So now that we've finished with the armour, the next step is to paint any of the black areas, and this includes the sections between the legs there as well, the straps across the chest, and then also the pipes on the backpack there as well. I'm painting all of these areas with Abaddon Black. Now because a number of these areas are quite hard to reach, I'm going to be using a small brush, very carefully picking out. The great thing about Abaddon Black is it's a base paint, which means that you'll apply really nicely over the white base coat. Once the black areas have been completed, the next step is to highlight over them, and for this we'll be using Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now, as with the previous step, you want to be very careful at this stage and just use your brush to very lightly go over the raised sections, such as on behind the knee here, just to create a very thin grey highlight. Now that the black areas are complete, we can now start working on the red areas, and this includes the plume on top of the helmet, the trim on the shoulder pads, and also the lenses in the helmet there as well. I'm painting all of these areas with Mephiston Red. When painting these areas, I would recommend strongly that you're extremely careful not to get the red onto the white areas, as it will be quite a difficult colour in which to paint over afterwards. So especially when you come to paint the shoulder pads, be very careful that you don't overspill onto the other areas. So now our Space Marine is looking a lot more like a white scar, and the next step is to apply some washes to the red areas, most notably the lenses and also the plume on top of the helmet, and for this we'll be using Carroburg Crimson. So as you can see here, I'm just applying the wash over the plume like so, and this will be pooling into all of the recesses and creating some nice shading. And Carroburg Crimson is fantastic for washing over red areas, as it will create some shading without dulling down the overall colour, as you can see is happening here. With the wash completed, the next step is to perform a highlight over the red areas. This includes the trim on the shoulder pads, the plume, and also the lenses as well. And for this we'll be using Evil Sunz Scarlet. Now highlighting the plume is quite easy, so we just need to pick out these raised sections like so. With the red areas completed, we can now move on to any leather pouches, such as the sheath on the back there, and I'm painting these areas first of all with Mountang Brown. Now the intention with this step is to get a nice and even coverage of the Mountang Brown, and as it's a base paint you should have no problem whatsoever. I do recommend watering it down slightly just to improve the flow, and then applying 2 coats. Wait until the first coat is dry, of course, before applying the second. Once the base layer is dry, the next step is to apply some shading, and for this we'll be using Agrax Earthshade. Now for this step I'll just be washing over the Mountang Brown with the Agrax Earthshade, which will pool and create some nice shading in the recesses. Once the wash is dry, we can now highlight the leather areas, and for this we'll be using Skrag Brown. Now for this step we'll just be highlighting this edge here, just being very careful just to drag the brush lightly across the edge, which will create a nice thin highlight. Now the next step is completely optional, it just depends on how comfortable you are with freehand designs, and for this we'll be using Khome Red to paint some triangle markings onto the legs and also across various points in the armour as well. Now for this step I'm using Khome Red, as it's slightly darker than the Mephiston Red that we've used for the other areas, and will act as a little bit of contrast. Now for this step I've mixed in a small amount of Lamia Medium as well, just to improve the flow of the mix. I'm going to be painting triangles, so I'm going to start in the middle here. I'm going to be first of all painting the outline very carefully, just doing a straight line up, and then another straight line next to it like so, and then filling that one in, and then just continuing this along the leg of the miniature. So as you can see, I've painted the markings onto the right leg here and also the wrist. I've also painted a small kind of lightning bolt above the eye as well. Now in order to add a little bit more definition to these markings, I'll now be highlighting them with Mephiston Red. So as before, I'm using a thin brush and I've mixed in a small amount of Lamy medium as well. I'm just going to be using this to highlight the edges of the markings, just along the top edges like so. And this will just create a little bit more definition into the markings, as you can see here. The next stages in painting the Space Marine are to paint all of the metal areas, so this includes the vents on the backpack there, including these ones at the bottom, this kind of section in the middle, and also anywhere on the bolter as well, such as the areas that have got white here, the magazine, the stock, the mechanisms at the back as well. I'm painting all of these areas with lead belcher. Now when painting these metal areas, be sure not to overspill onto the white areas. It's quite difficult to overpaint spilled metallic paint. I'm just going to be very careful, especially around the shoulder pad section here. I'm going to be applying this paint across all of the metal areas. With the base coat on the metal areas completed, the next step is to wash over the areas with Nuln Oil. So this wash will have the effect of not only adding some better depth to the colour, but also wash into the recess, as you can see it's doing here. And this will create some better definition of the metal areas from the other areas. And I would just recommend obviously being careful not to overspill onto the white areas at this point. Once the wash is dried, we can now proceed with highlighting the silver metal areas with Ironbreaker. Now, as with the previous steps, I'll be highlighting the very edges of these metal areas, such as the top of the vents here, just drawing the very thin line of Ironbreaker. And this will just help to enhance the lighting effects that we've got going on these metallic areas. Now that the silver metallic areas are completed, we can now start to move on to the gold metallic areas, such as the buckle on the chest there, the hilt, and also the scabbard at the back there, and also any of these extra adornments such as the knee pad and also the shoulder pad there as well. I'm painting all of these areas with Gehenna's gold. As Gehenna's gold isn't a base paint, I would recommend mixing in a small amount of water into the mix and applying 2 thin coats as opposed to 1 thick one, as this will give you a really nice and even coverage. As you can see, I'm just painting over the handle of the blade here. With the base coats dried, the next step is to wash over the gold areas with Seraphim Sepia. For this particular step, I've opted to use Seraphim Sepia as opposed to Agrax Earthshade, as it's not quite as dark, but will still provide some nice shading in the recesses. I'm just carefully applying it to the chest buckle here. Now the final step in painting the gold areas is to highlight the edges with Auric Armor Gold. So in much the same way as the previous highlights, I'll be highlighting on the edges of the gold areas. In Auric Armor is a really bright gold, so it gives a really nice kind of shiny gold finish. Now the final step in painting this miniature is an optional one, and I'll be applying some weathering to the armour, and for this I'll be using Skavenblight Dinge. Now if you've watched any of my previous Horus Heresy tutorials, you will know that I use a sponge for this technique, and this is just a piece of sponge that I've ripped from some packing foam, and I've dipped it in the Skavenblight Dinge, and you can just about see on the end there, and I'll be lightly dabbing it along the edges of the armour, anywhere where you'd expect chips to occur, and this will create a nice mottled effect, as you can see there. And the reason why I'm using Skavenblight Dinge instead of Abaddon Black is because of the white armour. Obviously Abaddon Black can contrast a little bit too much against the white armour. And here we have the completed miniature, who you can see I've glued to the base. Now whilst I've painted just a standard legionary in these particular colours for this tutorial, you could use the same techniques and scheme across all of your White Scar miniatures. Now if you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and also let me know which legions you would like me to tackle next, and subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my future Horus Heresy painting tutorials. Additionally, if you would like to support me in making more tutorials, you can do so by heading over to my Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description below, where you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month. So until next time, thanks for watching, and goodbye.